All right, we'll call the, this is April, I'm sorry, April meeting of the Clayton Planning Commission to order. Do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So everybody get their March minutes and read through them. Do you have any additions or corrections to the March minutes? Look for a motion to accept the March minutes.
I'll motion it.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No opposed. So on this, we have new business. The only real new business I was wanting to go through tonight was, I wanted to sit down and talk about annexation. I've had some conversations with some property owners. I have some interest. So I want to put together a list of some things, and we can go through that now, or we can do it at the end. I see we got a couple other things I didn't know about the Vandalia update. Have you got some stuff on that? And
Yeah, it's a
okay.
real brief update.
Okay, well, let's go through some of that stuff, and then we can work on that for a while, because I know we won't get it all done. You know, we'll kind of table that to the end of the meeting. If you want to go ahead and talk about what you've got.
Well, just to give everybody an update on the Vandalia Trail, as you know, we talked about it the last meeting, and with Ryan here. We did get a meeting last week with Anthony Moraine.
Oh, okay.
So him and his sister own the storage complex. He's open to letting us cross the end of his property there
Okay.
to come into the park, and which would keep the trail out on what is that, 500?
500.
500 there, and he's happy about that, so it's not going in front of his house or splitting his property. So he's going to work with the Hendricks County Park District. So
That's great.
so it's great news to see that, and Ryan's going to do some ideas about how to get it into the park. We got to cross that creek and some other stuff. The town has an easement through there anyhow for a sewer line, so we'll probably look at that area where that easement's at, or near where the creek's buried. He also wants to expand his outside storage on that lot as well, so be working with him as he does that as well. So I thought it was a good meeting.
Oh, yeah.
He was very open, kind to work with us, and you know, where when I talked to last time, he was vehement. He didn't want it going down the old railroad bed, so which I understand. He's got a lot of improvements. So, but that's where that's at. Ryan's going to continue to work on that. We've got some legal description stuff to do now before that those two will be able to get together and talk price for a permanent easement. So that project is moving from Ryan's standpoint. Like he said last time, the county may have some funds to use to build that section, so they may not even be applying for some of the grant funds. So depending on how that goes will be depending on how quickly the project moves forward. I don't see it moving forward building wise this year, probably finalizing the engineering and stuff, and then 23, it'd be most likely 24 if the grant goes through, if they go that route, but they're moving that project forward. Okay. So.
Have you got anything else?
Just out there, the comprehensive plan, we're still looking at the funding and stuff for that as well.
Okay.
I just didn't want you
No,
guys to think we dropped that.
No, I get it. No, we're good. Okay. Does anybody else got any old business they want to talk about? All right, move on to annexation. So I've had some property owner conversations, had some questions. So what I'd like to try to do is finalize a list of things that, this is kind of a pros and cons thing, I guess you would call it. What is annexation, so they understand fully that this is it's a legal acceptance into a governing body, that
they would be, taxes and all that kind of stuff, so we've got that. There's a lot of concern and question over this fixed tax rate, with the state. I've kind of reached out through another person to get some clarification on how that is. The state passed a law that agricultural ground would not, take the encumbrance of all the annexation taxes. If you annex a house into Clayton, there's a different set of taxes. You annex farm ground in, it's a fixed rate and doesn't absorb all those taxes, if I understand that law right. Is that state law that states when they annex farm ground into a community, that the rate is fixed because there are no services involved?
You mean
The
like
rate is fixed.
the town's rate?
The town's rate is fixed
Well,
at what
wouldn't
the
up
county
their
was
rate to
set
the
at.
town rate.
It wouldn't up it to the town rate, is the way I read that.
Is that the thing that Brennan was wanting us to have
Yes.
a certain wording that?
Yes, that was his
okay,
biggest
that's what-
concern, yes.
Okay.
Well, that, and we wouldn't change the zoning without his,
Well, and we can't legally change the
Right.
zoning without his
but
approval.
he still wants it in writing, and I
Well,
understand
they
that.
have to come in, you have to, when you annex, you always annex it with a land, with a zoning, and in that case, you would just annex it as farmland.
Right,
Correct, but he
Right.
was, at that time, he was concerned.
he was concerned
He
about.
wanted it in writing, even though it's state law. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with government, big or small, you get it in writing, whether it's on the books or not, if that's what you want
And
to
that's typically
join.
part of the application process, what your zoning you're requesting is you're annexing in.
Right.
Well, there was a lot of question about that the last meeting we had. We had an annexation meeting with a lot of landowners, and there was a lot of question about that. The state has that law, but, everybody was, well, how does it read? What guarantee do I have? Of course,
Yeah,
we have no guarantee that the legislatures won't change it. But once it's in that way, then it doesn't change till the next round. And that was a lot of the question.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that.
No,
don't
I
know.
understand.
Yeah,
Was
that-
it Tilly and, what was it?
Baker Tilly,
Baker Tilly had the answers to that. And I had that all circled in a book, and
I know.
I've left it in the wrong vehicle, and I don't know which one. It wasn't in my truck this morning, so it's in the other truck.
was there a book from the last time you looked at it with?
They had a whole information packet for us, and from Baker Tilly, and it stated those specific laws, and I looked it back up.
That was the biggest concern, was even though it's a state law, if the state were to change it, or basically if the town decided on a whim, because I'm sure 30 years ago when they decided on a whim, they just did what they wanted to, because it's the town. So they wanted, even if it's state law and it's wrote down state code, IC, whatever, blah, 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 when we're annexed in, we want it here, so that way in 20 years, when none of us are sitting here and it's someone else, they had it right here to go.
There's
This is
typically
our agreement.
two things that you do. You annex it and you have it as, in this case, we want to say farmland. The town may have it in their long-term comprehensive plan as
Right.
some other land use, and sometimes people will get both of those confused.
Right.
Right, they just wanted, it's redundant from our from the legality side of it, but they just wanted it in writing. They wanted a hard copy. They would agree to annex if it was wrote in. That was their biggest concern. They had a piece of paper that stated you can't change it, no matter who's town council, no matter who's whatever. It's right here. I have proof you can't change it. Even if state law changed, whatever, they had it. That was their biggest concern. And I understand it's kind of, because that's the way it came in, that's the way it should stay. but-
Well, as he's annexed, well, I'm not gonna speak out of turn on that.
No, I understand.
My feelings typically would be the property owner's gonna have to change it. There is ways for other parties to initiate change, and the plan
Right.
commission could initiate that.
No, and I understand. And because we had long discussions with them back a couple of years ago about it, because they just, and I get it from a person who doesn't deal with, like when things are being explained to people,
But a lot of
Um,
times,
you have to,
somebody will annex it in and have agreements that it could be zoned X, Y, or Z, you know, the town wants that because then that adds value to the property when they go sell it to the developer. The
Right.
developer doesn't have to necessarily go through that next step.
Right.
So I've seen kind of
Well,
both sides.
Their
of this.
concern is, the people I've talked to's concern is more protecting it as agricultural ground.
Right, they don't want a town council, not that this council would do it, but say that 30 or 20 years from now, their kids or whatever, trying to run the family farm, it's been a family farm for whatever, 100 years, and then you get some people in here that just decide, oh no, we're gonna develop that because that's what we're doing, and kinda just go and change it from agricultural and start taxing them on a commercial rate to try to force the, I understand, I'm just, yeah, I'm just saying that was their big, they wanted it. And that was something Dan couldn't understand when we were trying to just say, just put it in writing. Just put the state law in writing. That makes it simple for
I
them.
don't know about state law. I'd have to find that report from
Yeah.
Baker Tilly. I've not seen that information packet.
Okay.
I'll start looking again for it,
Okay.
but I've not.
I believe I have it.
I know I got it.
I've got
Like I
it.
said, I've got it because I was.
I've got it
scrolling
in my
through it the
folder,
other day.
but
The other thing was how much, this was an interesting conversation. The conversation to me was, why do you only want to annex to here?
mhm.
Why do you not want to annex all that I have, which would take us clear to the edge of Belleville?
Which in that meeting, one of those meetings we had with Baker Tilly or whoever it was with those charts, they said, well, you can do it if they're a continuous landowner.
Mhm.
If it's super voluntary, you can just keep, as long as
If
there's
it's
no
not-
breaks in it, you can go down through there.
So the issue with here is that ground is titled in several different LLCs, but they are all the same,
If they're all controlled by
one
one
party.
individual or one party
Yeah.
or one parties,
Yeah,
I did talk to Graham,
okay,
the town's attorney. He believes it could be done as one chunk.
one chunk, okay. Because potentially that would be over 1,800 acres,
You know?
if they would have an interest,
Mhm.
so.
And for somebody to be annexed, they have to be on
Our board,
the border. So say somebody in, Belleville couldn't say, hey, I wanna be annexed, but
Not unless we annexed, say it was all Mr. Brennan, just one piece of
Yeah.
property, keep it simple. Mr. Brenneman went all the way down to Belleville and butted up to Belleville. And then that property butted up to Brenneman that we just annexed. Then, once we had Mr. Brenneman annexed, then they could annex, we could annex them and then you can keep moving. But, you can't just skip like that.
No, not anymore.
because I heard quite a few people talking about how they didn't wanna be taken over from Plainfield, and they're right there on the edge, actually, I think, of Plainfield. But,
You got a lot of landowners between here and the edge of Liberty Township is the
Plainfield's
problem.
not coming west till they figure out what to do with Owen Hack. 750 acres standing between them and 39.
And it'd be nice if the town of Clayton could put a stop to that, if we could get people interested in annexing and maybe work our way down 39 so Clayton could benefit from some of the businesses that will eventually move in 20 to 50 years, whatever, 10 years, doesn't matter.
how often can you annex?
If it's super voluntary, it's up to the petitioner, it's up to the landowners to petition annex.
So once you get Brenneman's, the next day, you could do somebody,
You could
it's not
start
like
on
you can only do this,
Right.
so many months of the year, or,
Mm-mm.
The
Yeah,
only-
a lot of times it's notification. I'll just use this as an example because it's easy. Let's just say here's town, we're just gonna annex parcel 3, that's one owner. I couldn't annex parcel 5 until this one's in. Now, if this one's, say, through the legal petition period and it's gone through the first reading, the first step, we can start the process on this. But you have to do this one first and get it all the way to the finish line before this one can get to the finish line and start.
Unless
And
the,
then you come out and you could do this one, and then, and so forth.
unless you had a consecutive group of landowners that wanted to do all super voluntary all in one straight shot, correct?
That's a little more
No.
tricky because it's
No.
not one,
Okay.
typically it's not one person controlling all of it. If it's like we're talking over
Right.
here, it's one person in different entities, these were different individuals, then it would be, you have to
Two
stagger
different-
it.
Okay, I just wondered if 3, let's just for that chart, if 3 and 4 and 5 were controlled by 2 different people, But both of them
Have
come
to
together,
finish-
both of them come and said at the same time, we both want to join the town. They can't,
You can't do that.
okay. You'd have to start with 3 and then go to 4 and 5.
The only way you can get this all in one chunk is if 3, 4, and 5 were under the same ownership or,
Makes sense.
so. There's also some other rules about how contiguous to town
Yeah.
it is. So let's just say you've got I'll just use 3 again. This has got a pretty big side that's contiguous to town. You can get a bigger parcel, but if you've got a little bitty piece that's contiguous to town, you've got to be careful on,
Yeah, you can't get a big piece through a little tiny piece.
yes.
Has to be 1/8,
Continuous, yes.
Contiguous. So,
1/8 of their
Right.
surface area, so to speak.
it's one of those quirks.
It just keeps you from going in a straight line. A town from going just straight and then coming
with-
back and
with
filling
small,
in.
narrow parcels
Yes.
to get to a bigger parcel.
Correct.
Well, it keeps it from looking like Avon, because if you look at Avon's annexation map, they got all kinds of holes.
Well, Avon was done when they created the town,
Right.
is how, but you look at Plainfield and Brownsburg, they've got holes too.
No, I get it, yeah, Avon was really the worst, it seemed like, at it, because that was you could drive up Dan Jones Road and have a piece of property on one side that was in the town and a piece of property on the other side that wasn't, and then go another half mile and it was.
And not every development that's going up today chooses to annex.
Right.
Some of them still choose to go through the county.
So,
And that's one of the disadvantages of somebody like Avon that doesn't have water or sewer, so they can't say like, here, if you want Clayton sewer, one of our requirements is to annex.
Mhm. And eventually it'd be nice if we could have water. I know the town doesn't need it. The people of the town have wells that work. But I think in order to develop and to attract bigger businesses, if we could annex even down into Belleville, we could supply water down there or even just water for firefighting. That's something we ought to maybe consider looking into for the future too. I mean, I don't know if that's our group or the town council does that, but would be
I
a
definitely
good.
think it's something we can look at as a planning standpoint, but there's not much we can go beyond that. That's a large dollar,
That's
Well,
something that
a very large dollar.
That's
I
something you look
understand.
at as part of your comprehensive plan.
yeah, I mean, I understand that. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. If we had maybe an idea of maybe how to look at grants or how I'm sure there's grants to help small towns develop water.
There is.
You know, that would be a good utility to have, especially if we could get a grant to get it in to help the town grow, or at least have water for fire protection.
So the only Indiana code I could find related to what you were talking about annexing farmland is the one that specifically mentions that the municipality may not change the zoning of the agricultural land without permission from the property owner.
Okay.
And it does mention an exemption, but I don't understand any of the wording that's related to the exemption, but that might be what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think
It doesn't spell that out in English words
right.
as far as
No, I
what
understand.
the exemption is, but I don't know if it's referring to that zoning issue or that tax.
I think that the issue was, my understanding, and I'd have to go back through that paperwork, was, as they explained it, it was for, I'll just give you an example, if you taxed, and the town does, I mean, we've learned this in the last few months with this fire district, the town has a higher fire tax rate than the township does. I mean, that's just,
All of our taxes are higher
No,
than
I get it.
the township.
right,
I mean,
right.
Because we're in
I
a
got
town.
my tax bill this last week, and if you look on it, it
There's the
it
town
spells
employee.
each one out. It has the municipality tax bill, it has the county tax bill,
Right.
it has the library tax bill, the school district tax bill, which, that's kind of an interesting thing, is last year, the school board approved a 16-cent increase, and this year they've approved a 26-cent increase, and nobody has caught on to
Yeah, it was 16
that at
cent
all.
see, that's what I
So,
got caught in a crossfire on that. They said, well, they only approved 16 cents. I said, no, that was last year's.
right, last year.
The 26 is
16
this year. We're gonna get hit again
Right.
next year for another 26
Right.
cents. And that's what,
Yeah, they hammered on, you know, our fire territory proposal is increasing, but there the school board just.
slid that right through.
slid right
Nobody
past
knew anything
Well, you
about it.
can't-
2 years in a row,
Right.
16
You can't-
cents and then 26 cents. So.
You can't have you can't have a first-class school system and not have the money to fund it, just like you can't have full-time fire department or police department if you don't have the money to fund it. You know, it's an unfortunate part of being an adult, I guess.
Annexation is also, it's costly. When we, even with James Penner's super voluntary annexation, we paid almost $50,000 for that process.
Well, and that was,
So,
that's why I was trying to figure out how to get the best bang for our buck out of this deal, is if we get, you know, and I'll use Brenneman's as an example, because that's been the biggest conversation I've had. There's a huge amount of ground, you know, we could possibly annex there. I mean, we could get clear to Belleville. If we do it, if we're gonna spend the 50,000, spend it and get 1,200 acres, not 50, you know, if that makes any sense.
yeah, that wouldn't, the cost was all, you know, the
I know.
lawyers who get involved and.
No, there's not a cost per acre,
Right.
it's just,
Right.
it's gonna cost us 50 whether we annex an acre or we annex 1,500.
Yes.
Yeah, and
I agree.
that was my thought, is if the more we can get in one chunk, and it honestly, that was his conversation with me, is why don't you want it all?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and,
That question was
I mean,
asked at the
my
meeting.
understanding is our goal is to create a good buffer donut around our town
right,
so that we aren't the future Speedway of
exactly,
Plainfield.
no, I agree.
We're the little, you know,
Well, you gotta, if, at some point it's gonna get developed out here, whether we like it or not, whether the citizens of this community and the township like it or not. It's getting developed. You're gonna have big businesses, you're gonna have box chain store food, you know, big chain stores, you're gonna have all that. In my opinion, if your town isn't growing and isn't trying to make growth with annexation to get ground in the town, we don't have enough ground right now to build anything major. We have no room for it. Not that Mr. Brennan will want to sell, but there may come a point in time where he might sell some of that ground down along 40, for instance, to put in, you know, chain store or a fast food restaurant or something of that nature. And I think it would benefit the town to have that in the actual town of Clayton and not just in the township. You know, otherwise, basically, if my thought process to this, and I'm not picking on any town, but we have a good example of Clayton's still operating as a town. We still have town board, town council. We're trying to keep things moving, and then you look at Stylesville. Businesses are kind of going out in Stylesville, and it's kind of dying off a little bit. They're not growing. And you get to Belleville. Belleville was a town at some point in time, and
It was never an incorporated
never
town, they were never incorporated.
I'm just saying, you know what I mean? The area is, it's not doing anything. It's not developing. And if we don't get some ground to where we can develop this town, Clayton's never going to change. You're not going to be able to do anything in this town, develop it in the right way. You don't have to just bring business in, but I'm just saying you can't bring anything in because you've got nowhere to put it.
I will indicate there is some, especially if you get down to 40 where you can bring some businesses in. Remember, you know, residential creates 1%. You know,
Businesses,
is a 3% tax rate. You don't want all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, and you want some businesses to help pay for some of those services for the town.
right? Businesses pay, in most towns, businesses pay a pretty large chunk of that income for the tax revenue base.
And so from my perspective, you can get down to 40 and you look at the gas station, the bank across the street from 40, and then you've got those smaller, I'll call them industrial or commercial buildings that are really nice structures. You get that into Clayton, something like that into Clayton, that creates tax base to help support other things, and plus it creates a job node too.
Sure.
Correct. That's the one thing people forget is if you have businesses in here, you have employees, employees have to have lunch, employees have to have gas, employees need things. The more people you have in your community working in your community, the more other businesses benefit from that.
And it's not all gonna be the big box warehouses that you're
Exactly.
seeing
No.
by I-70. Some of these, the reason why I use those examples, because those are small,
Right.
20,000 square foot buildings that are more of a manufacturing, that have quality jobs in it,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
still keep the community scale smaller.
Um, where to go with this next? I was hoping to have a complete type list for everybody to go through tonight, and I didn't get that far. But I would like to have, by next meeting, I'm gonna try to have a list put together for us to go through of what do I wanna say, and I'll probably get with you to get some clarification on how to word some things.
The sooner I get it, the
No,
more I
I
can
will,
work with you
yeah,
on
and
it.
I got started on it, and I need to get it finished so that but it's basically just a series, and what is annexation? How do we, how does a town use annexation? So that people have some clarification, then I wanna definitely put in there that the state statute, as far as the zoning, operation, that's a big thing for a lot of these, agricultural pieces that we're looking at. They want them they want them to stay agricultural currently. I'm sure at some point, as development comes this way, I mean, we all know that when they come in and start talking about $50,000 and $100,000 an acre for a piece of ground, it's really hard for these guys to turn it down, and that's kind of where I just would like to see us be a little more ahead of that game as it starts to come out here. I mean, I moved out here, it's been almost 30 years ago, and, it used to be an easy drive to jump on US 40 and drive to Indianapolis. You get out there at 6:30, 7 o'clock now, and it's headlights or taillights, one way or the other, bumper to bumper for an hour. It's not what it used to be, and it's coming this way, and that's what, I have to agree with Nick, whether you like it or not, it's coming. I'd just like to see us be a little more prepared for it. If we get to Belleville and we can get water, that's great. We get to Belleville and we can't get water, that's just the way it is.
I meant us getting a pump station here. We
Oh,
have
I
plenty of
get it.
water to pump and
You gotta
provide
put
fire service
You gotta
if we
put
can.
wells down and stuff like that. The current wells that are in, those,
The
they don't
town,
produce
and
enough capacity for a.
No, I'm
water
talking about a
pumper.
pump station or something versus like a water tower to provide maybe just fire service and lines, main lines out. And then if we can look into grants, if there's grants out there to do such a thing, in the next 5 or 10 years, something like that down the road, the town could look at that to put in, and then also it would help lower the homeowners insurance, business insurance. You put in like a strip type store, I guess, to use as an example, they gotta have some sort of sprinkler system. I mean, I understand the developer's gotta pay for that, but if we had a water system to hook onto, they might be more apt to build it in the town if they could get the land bought along 39 or something, if we had that annexed versus saying, no, we'll put it down by the interstate where there's already water. Got to attract them. And I think if we have a meeting like the public hearings again over the annexation, we as a group ought to have a good answer for people when they ask us why does it benefit me to join this town. We need a really good answer, and not just kind of shrug our shoulders and go, well, you don't want to be part of Plainfield. I mean, that was kind of the impression I got, because that was the first meeting that I started on this board, and that was the impression I got that night, that old Dan just sat there and goes, well, you don't want to be part of Plainfield. Well, I don't really think that the majority of those landowners are worried about being part of Plainfield right at the moment, because a person that's 45 to 55 years old probably is going to move or retire, move to a retirement home or something, not a retirement home, but a home in Florida or something, move out of the area before Plainfield would come right up next door to us, and get them. I think that, we just need to come up with a good presentation with good answers, for those questions.
Anybody got anything else on that?
Have we looked at like the current water table levels? Like, have we seen any dropping, or is it foreseeable that we might have to? I mean, that just a normal well system might dry up for most of our lives?
Clayton fortunately sits on an aquifer.
Okay.
I've talked to Dester Harness, who's one of the oldest well drillers around here. I mean, he's in his 80s, and he will tell you that there is plenty of water here at 60-foot level. There's another aquifer west of town at 200 West that's huge as well, and there's one on the east side a little bit just before you get to that line. So in talking to him, because we had this conversation about water for the town, Belleville, is a high spot, out here, you can see it. That's a limestone ridge, believe it or not. At 100 feet, you hit solid limestone. And he said there's plenty of water below it, but there's 200 feet of limestone to go through to get to it. And around here, we don't do that. Now, you get out in Oklahoma, they'll punch a well 1,000 foot. They don't care what they got to go through to get water. But that's kind of an unusual thing around here because water's fairly easy to get around here.
Even your commercial wells for municipalities are only 100 to 150,
150, yeah.
200 feet deep, depending on.
Eli punched two 10-inch wells in Avon for the sewer plant, and they were 140 feet. And they produced 500 gallon a minute.
The only thing you would have to worry about if you produce a commercial system is the immediate wells next to it that are shallower. You may drop the water table, 5 feet or 10 feet in a small geographic area. You'll see that, but that's only if you're pulling a significant amount of water out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. If you create a system, you'll have to do that sort of study to see what the impacts on the neighboring wells. That will be part of any water study that you do.
That's why I ask, is when we lived on the west side of Plainfield, we were down Moon Road at that addition where they just built that elementary school, and that well ended up drying up along with a bunch of the other ones because of their new commercial well system out there, I guess. And
Just west of that, yeah.
And then the utility that owns those wells is responsible for
Yeah, they ultimately brought them in.
have you either get them onto the municipal system, or in some cases they will drill their well deeper so they get access to water. I've seen both solutions.
I mean, this town kind of experienced that, I think, when they put the sewer system in back in the 60s. If anybody was here when that happened, I don't. Leanne, you may be the only one that was around here at that time. I wasn't.
I was probably 8 months old.
Oh, okay. So, but they told me when there was a lot of shallow jet pump wells in this town at 30 feet, and when they dug the sewer system, a lot of them dried up because at 20 feet you could drive what they call a 2-inch spike in here and get well in the water in this town, and it dried a lot of them up. The infiltration into the sewer system dried them up, and people had to punch the wells down deeper. So, yeah, it can happen. I'm not saying it couldn't, but it's at 60 feet. I mean, I live northeast of town here on a little farm. My well's 60 feet. I filled my swimming pool off of it when I had kids in the above ground swimming pool. Watered 100 head of cattle for 4 years. I never ran out of water. And I mean, it's the aquifer. I forget how big it is, but it's huge. It runs up against that limestone ridge and runs west to the west edge of town.
Okay.
So it's a huge aquifer. Yeah, water would be a great thing in this town. It's just, every proposal we get is $10 million. And that's quite an exorbitant hit if we don't have something to help feed that, to pay for that.
The best way to get water is with a new developer coming in, and you build the water system for that new development, and then you slowly expand it off of that new development. That's the best way, most financial way to get the development. That way the developer's paying for the vast majority of the system.
Right.
That's probably the only way to really get that without drastic issues in grants. Our wells are not drying up, which triggers some of the federal grants and stuff that are out there.
Yeah, just because you're doing it because you want development or whatever, that's not, yeah, that's not a good answer, I get it, so. All right, if anybody has anything, they'd like to add to this list as we go through this, I'll put it together, I'll have it for the next meeting, then maybe we can get it out to some of these landowners and see if maybe we can generate some activity, and within a year, maybe we can see some annexation to get, if Brenneman Farms wants to take us to Belleville, I think that's a great opportunity for us. That definitely will, stop some of the, it can definitely give us a buffer from the southwest.
And one of the biggest advantages is local control versus you're controlling, and this is from the landowner too, it's controlling from here versus what the county, sometimes the bigger agencies think what's best for the whole county versus what's best for the small municipality.
Right.
So that's one of the advantages, is that they would be partnering with a municipality that's gonna think what's best for its community.
Well, and another advantage too, that ought to be listed on there if we're gonna give them a reason to join is, if they join the town, they can volunteer their time to sit on one of these boards. They can also run for town council if they don't like the direction things are going.
They have to live
And-
directly in the town to run on council.
Right. Yep, and if they're
But-
annexed in town, then
Well, but most of the guys I'm talking to are not.
I'm just
Right.
saying, that would be a benefit
But they
to,
could be on one of the boards.
Right, yeah, they
They
could
could-
sit on this board or the BZA or,
They couldn't be elected unless their house happened to be there.
right, I was just saying, that would be a good advantage, cause in the county it'd be really hard to get, I think it would be really hard to get elected onto a county board, harder to get elected on a county board than it would be to get elected on like the Clayton Town Board.
But I'll make sure I get with Rob.
yeah.
I'll put it on my to-do list to follow up with him, so if he gets busy,
Yeah, it's getting that way.
because Rob knows I'll stop over once in a while.
That's fine. It's easier for me if somebody does, cause it keeps me loaded in the right direction, motivated. But, okay. Anybody got anything else? Well, adjourn the meeting at 6:42. Thanks for coming out tonight.